So good afternoon, everyone. Let us start with the next subject, which is called as OS, called as operating system. Now, as far as your OS subject is concerned, it is basically, you can say, theoretical subject. In this type of subject, the questions that are asked are specifically based on straightforward questions. Like, जैसे आपको C में थोड़े से twisters आते हैं, MCQ आते हैं, वैसे नहीं है. Here you will get a questions based on concepts of it. So this is again so if you consider OS, you can say initially there were around 8 to 10 questions which were asked specifically on operating systems. For operating system, you can refer these slides. Also, I am going to share you few MCQ type of questions, which I have already kept. I'll just show you. Maybe just a second. Right. So today it's operating system subject day 01. I've kept this slide, PPT slide, which I'm going to share it, and as well as I've kept few MCQs too. Now for operating system subject, since it is a next subject for your batch, तो आज आपको OS subject का folder clone करना पड़ेगा, right? So that you can practice these MCQ type of questions on OS, right? So operating system concepts में हम क्या-क्या concepts देखेंगे, कौन से topics cover करेंगे, we will see that. We will see first introduction part, why there is a need of an OS. What do you mean by operating system? What are the different functions of operating systems? Then we will see some architecture of Unix. What do you mean by file system? What is process control block? What do you mean by system calls, their categories? What do you mean by dual mode operations? So this covers the basic of OS. Later on, we will see something called as process management. What do you mean by process control block? What do you mean by states of process? CPU scheduling, some CPU scheduling algorithms, how one process communicate with other, that is called as inter-process communication. And we will see something called as process synchronization, deadlock, and its handling methods. So this complete is with respect to the process management. When you talk about memory, then we will see something called as memory management, where we will see something called as swapping, memory allocation methods. What do you mean by internal fragmentation, external fragmentation, segmentation, paging, what is virtual memory? And finally, we will see something called as file management, where we will see what do you mean by file and how basically the file system is there. What do you mean by disk? What are the file allocation techniques or disk space allocation techniques, and some algorithms. Why I'm talking about here algorithms? These are the algorithms which are where we will see how these algorithms can be solved, and you can predict, you can say calculate some, you can do some calculation part and you can get some output. So we will be taking some examples specifically on algorithms part 2. So today we will just focus on introduction, something called as system call, what is kernel, what is the need of OS, and so on. And gradually we will see other topics like process, memory, and file in the next lectures, right? So if you talk about this subject, again, it is a little theory subject. So once you listen to the concepts, then when you revise these PPTs, maybe that is sufficient for that. So try to attend the sessions live so that your doubts and queries get resolved at that moment itself, right? Abstract view of computer system is basically looks like this. For example, when you talk about, you can say, I have a computer hardware. And hardware is basically your mouse, you can say keyboard, your monitor, maybe some printer, maybe your hardware devices, like you have an IC card, you have cables and so on, battery and so on. And when you talk about some application programs, so you may execute a Chrome browser, you are using Acrobat, you are using VS Code, you are using some compilers, you are using some file managers, like you are using music players, and so on and so forth. So every user is having different requirement, and every user uses different kind of application programs and system programs, right? So if I say I'm giving an input through keyboard, definitely I'm going to get the output on my monitor. If I'm using a VS Code as an application, it is only giving you the output only. But how that VS Code is generating the output for you, how your computer, how your Chrome is working in the backend, what when you give a print command, how it is working in the backend, it is completely possible because there is one important thing which is sitting between your hardware and the application program, and that is nothing but OS. So operating system is basically the intermediate layer, or it is basically the intermediate layer between your hardware and the application programs. That is a basic requirement of OS. Without your OS, your hardware and software will not be able to communicate with each other. Hardware can be anything. It can be CPU, memory, IO devices. Application programs can be your word processors, spreadsheets, web browsers, anything can be there. But when I say I want to coordinate between these two, when you're saying I want integer variable through the VS Code, so compiler gives you 4 bytes of memory, but it is in concern with the operating system only. So when you talk about operating system, it controls and coordinates among various applications. That is called as OS, right? So the fundamental of goal of computer system is to execute user programs and make the task easier. It means that if you do not have OS, in that case, you will not be able to basically execute any program on your system. It's like a dead, right? So we are going to see what exactly and how exactly this OS works. That means how the memory is being memory has been allocated, how you can say that files are getting handled, what do you mean by disk scheduling, how your processes or the programs gets executed. Every task that is done, it is done by your operating system. But कैसे perform होता है वो हम you can say we will see in this subject called as OS. So have you understood what is the need of OS and what all things we are going to see into this point, into the subject? This subject is a little easier than your data communication network. I know that initially data communication network subjects, some people have found little bit difficult at the point of IP addressing specifically. But एक बार अगर आप recorded session सुनोगे तो आपको वो भी easy जाएगा. But this subject is more easier than your DCN subject and computer fundamental subject. So once you focus, then it will go very smooth and you can score well and you can get a good rank also. The reason is in some of the C programs, you are not sure about the output, but in these kind of subjects, you can select the correct option based on your theoretical knowledge and you can get a good rank. So this is how it is, right? So I have, this is basically called as an abstract view of computer system, right? So where actually OS fits in? When I say application software, it can be anything, maybe any kind of application that you are using. It can be a computer hardware. That means your any hardware that we talk about, maybe processor, maybe RAM, maybe keyboard, and so on. Where does OS lies? OS lies in between over here. So when the user gives some input through some application, that is application software. This application requests your operating system to use some hardware devices. For example, when I'm saying I am declaring one variable from my VS Code, that is through application software. It means I'm requesting my compiler, to tell to the operating system that I want 4 bytes of memory. When I say I want 4 bytes of memory, at that moment, your operating system will check whether I have a memory available for me. If yes, then it will allocate a memory into your RAM, which is nothing but hardware. And this is what is how your communication takes place between your application programs and the computer hardware. It's not direct connection. There is an intermediate and the most important layer that comes between your application software and the computer hardware, that is OS. Once it is allocated, this is given, and this is the output that you get. Now, second important is when you talk about OS, it is basically when I'm saying interface programs, when you're saying operating system, all that comes under the software category. And when you're talking about hardware, everyone is aware about what is hardware. We have already seen what are the different hardware types in your system in computer fundamental subject, right? So when I say software, OS you can consider as a software only. It's a software because you install different types of operating systems on your machines. There are 2 modes. One is user mode and kernel mode. I will come to this point after a few slides. What is kernel mode and what is user mode, right? Now, when I say what is a basic need of OS, it is basically managing the application programs, managing the input and output, and consistent user interface. For example, if I start Paint, will it open a Paint for me quickly? Yes. If I minimize it, is it coming back to your PPT slide? Yes. If I'm saying I want to go to this folder, OC04, it's going over here. Am I trying to move from one application to another application? Yes. But who manages it? It's the operating system. So management of different number of application programs which are getting executed is basically done by your OS. Next, managing input and output unit. Are you really bothered कि yes, I'm typing hello from my keyboard and I'm getting the output onto it? But backend में क्या होता है? I'm really not bothered about it. Who takes care of it? That is your OS. That's why we say managing the input and output unit. If you're giving a print command, if you're using a scanner, you're using scanner. In that case, everything is managed by your OS, and that is nothing but managing the input and output unit. Next is consistent user interface. For example, user interface is basically via which you are giving some instruction and you are getting the output. For example, when you say consistent user interface, for example, if I'm saying I'm going to terminal, right? And when I go to terminal, in that case, I can say I want to create a new directory or I want to just list my commands, right? I'll say dir. So this is a command that I'm giving through command prompt. This is called as command line user interface. जब मैं यहाँ पे पेंट पे जाती हूँ या जब मैं मेरे क्रोम ब्राउजर पे जाती हूँ या फिर व्हेन आई से आई एम वर्किंग विद सम कैलकुलेटर एप्लीकेशन सो आई एम वर्किंग विद द यूजर इंटरफेस जब तक मैं मेरे कैलकुलेटर में सम इफ आई पुट 25 plus 10 until and unless I do not enter I will not be able to communicate until and unless I do not enter some data I will not be able to get the result out of it so that is called as GUI kind of application कि मुझे graphical user interface that is calculator दिखता है यहाँ पे मुझे command prompt दिखता है that is called as command user interface so you can have a GUI kind of application or you can have a CUI kind of applications those are basically called as user interfaces and how I'm able to manage it by using consistent user interface. Is it okay? Did you all get it up to this point? Right. So that's what is a basic need of operating system. Right now, just give me a second. Okay. All right. Now let us proceed ahead to the next slide in which we will observe OS in more detail. When I say OS, it's a program. You can say it's a software. You can say it's a program which controls the execution of application programs. Without OS, we cannot perform any execution of the programs. You can also say it's a system software. What is system software? It's a collection of system programs which acts as a interface between user and the hardware. Now, when I say OS, this is called as layered architecture of OS. I have something called as hardware on my machine. I have something called as different kind of user written applications. When I say I have these applications, in between, I have the layer, which is nothing but OS. So for Unix, this is Unix layered architecture. For Unix, for Linux, I have different commands and libraries. Just if you have Ubuntu software, if you want to list down some directory, so you type ls command. If you are on Windows platform, if you want to list down some directory, you write dir command. Sometimes you write cls command. Sometimes you write clear command. If you want to make a directory, then you can create a directory like mkdir, and you can, if you want to switch to another directory, you can write just cd command, and so on and so forth. So it is basically when you wish to write. So when you are writing some commands, in that case, those commands are also called as system calls. We will see in detail what is the system call is, right? So when I say hardware and the application, the interface between them is nothing but operating system. So you can say it's a system software, which is collection of system program, which acts as an interface between the user and the hardware. So these are different kind of definitions of operating system. When you say OS, it has two views. One is system view, another is user view. When I say system view, you can see this kind of view is system view. System मेरा कैसे operations perform करता है whenever I am giving any kind of input. And user view means आपको GUI कैसे दिखता है, आपको command line, command argument कैसे, you can say black screen जो terminal रहते हैं या command prompt बोलते हैं, how it is visual, how it is viewed at your end, that is called as different viewpoints. Right? At the system level, your OS performs different operations, and at the user side, you will be able to see only the upper layer, you can say. Internals, you are not aware about it. That is called as viewpoint. Any computer system consists of processors, main memory, disk, printer, various IO devices. This is for short because we have seen a system called as computer fundamental subject. Next, if I wish to perform or manage all these things together, आप फाइल को सेव करते हो, you save that file in your hard disk, maybe in C drive, D drive. You maybe try to perform some read-write operation. You try to perform the operations on the different processors and so on. You try to link between input and output devices. So you are performing different operations on the hardware. And when you are trying to manage all these varied components together, they are called as layer of software. And that is nothing but OS. So what is OS? It manages all your computer parts together. That is hardware also. When I say OS, its core part is kernel, right? So in case of when we talk about kernel, I hope you all remember the booting process, the one which I have explained on day one of computer fundamental. राइट। बूटिंग के लिए बूटस्ट्रैप लोडर का क्या काम था? बूटिंग के लिए बूटस्ट्रैप लोडर का क्या काम था? ओएस इंस्टॉल करना कि ओएस को लोड करना?
ओएस को लोड करना।
OS को लोड करना, right? If you talk about OS, loading of OS, in that case, can I say loading of OS can be done by your bootstrap program? But when I say loading of OS, it is based on kernel. Kernel को load करना into the main memory is basically called as booting process, right? Now, I hope you also remember that there is a bootstrap program, there is a bootloader who loads the kernel into the main memory. Every operating system is having their own kernel. Do you remember this? When you talk about, I have multiple number of OSs, I have multiple number of OSs on one single machine, then I can go for, you can say, selection of one OS, and accordingly I will proceed ahead. And that is basically called as loading of kernel from disk to your main, from main hard disk to your main memory. Sector 0 में आपका kernel रहता है. जब तक आपका कर्नल मेन मेमोरी में नहीं आता है तब तक आपका मशीन स्टार्ट नहीं होता है. So it is a core part or the program of operating system which runs continuously into the main memory. That is called as OS. All right. Now, what is OS? OS is also known as. Now, there are multiple OS are there, multiple kernels are there. That's true. Anamika, I am muting you. If you have any queries, you can post it into the chat box. The one I think few have joined today, Anand and Mansi, rename your profile names. And one more important thing, if you wish to communicate, then you can communicate through the chat box or you can raise your hand, right? This is the protocol that we normally follow, right? For multiple OS, there are multiple kernel. Every OS, Anirudh, is having its own kernel. Depends upon the selection of OS, your kernel gets loaded into the main memory and your OS gets started and your machine gets started. This is how it is. Okay, Anirudh? Yes, on the same system, you can have multiple systems, multiple operating systems. That's the reason I've written a single machine can have one or more number of operating system. तो जब, for example, in my machine, I have Ubuntu as well as I Windows. तो जब मैं machine start करती हूँ, I get the options in which OS you wish to load, whether you want to load into Ubuntu operating system or whether you want to go for Windows. So when I select Windows, तो मेरा Windows start होता है, Windows का पूरा GUI load होता है. Otherwise, it goes into Ubuntu. So on one machine, yes, you can have more than one operating system too. Is it okay? Right. Now, once the question was asked as a theoretical way, your operating system is also called as option A as a resource allocator, option B as a resource manager, and option C as a control manager, and option D, all of the above. So you can say all these are the different names given to the operating system. Let me explain all these meanings now. When I talk about OS as a resource allocator, everyone, let us assume I have one machine, I have the second machine, right? These two are the machines which want to go for print job. So let us say this is print, this wants to print 50 pages. Let us say I have another machine which wants to print 40 pages. I have only one printer. Let us assume this is my printer device, right? So first of all, this is my printer. First of all, assume my printer is already printing some other document. It's printing, let us say 30 pages initially, right? Next, the first request, let us say, goes from machine A over here. The second request goes from machine B over here. So this is the first request that have gone. This is the second request that have gone. Now, if I'm saying I have only one printer, when I say printer A or when I say machine A is giving a print job, तो वो printer इसी printer के पास जाएगा. Let us say printer is having a name called as P. And if I'm saying B is a machine which is connected to the printer, obviously that will also basically given to the P. Now I'm trying to explain these three concepts: resource allocator, resource manager, and control program. It means that when the first job of this printing is, let us say, done by the printer. Now, can I say now the printer will be given to the machine A? Yes or no? Everyone. So the second task that printer will do is basically it will try to print how many pages? Let us say 50 pages. The third task that it will say, I have to print 40 pages. So what I want to conclude over here is, when you are talking about printer, this printer is called as a resource. What it is called as a resource. Is the resource is shared among two machines in our scenario? Yes. When I am saying this printer is doing the job of 50 pages printing, then can I say this printer is allocated for A? This is done by your operating system. क्या आपको पता चलता है क्या कि प्रिंटर मेरे मशीन से 50 पेजेस कैसे वर्क करता है and so on? No. Who does that allocation? OS does that allocation. And that is called as OS is a resource allocator. It allocates the required resources to all the running programs. Next, once I say my first job is over, it will be done. Okay. Second job, it is done. Next job, it is doing that job as a 40 page printing. So what I want to say over here is managing of these resources. Am I managing one printer to get allocated for A and for B, and I'm performing my job in a very smooth way? Yes, of course. That's why it is called as resource manager. It manages the available resources among all the running programs. Controlling and allocating the resources is basically done by your OS. That's why it is called as resource manager. Right? Now, can I say first job is executed by the printer, which is 30 pages. Second job is done by your printer by printing 50 pages. Third job is that it is getting executed is 40 pages. Means can I say printer एक queue maintain करता रहेगा? Yes, I have got a request from A and I have got the request from B. So this is the queue that my printer must maintain. Once A is out, then it is done. It will be out from the queue. Then it will be B. B will be done. Then B will be out. Is it basically controlling and managing the execution of all programs on its own? Yes, and that's why OS is doing that in the backend. That is called as OS is also called as control program. Have you understood these terminologies? Why the OS is called as resource allocator, resource manager, control program? You can take any resource. I'm not asking only about the printer. It can be your main memory. It can be your hard disk. It can be your pen drive. It can be your scanner. It can be your joystick. Any hardware devices you consider, any device which is basically connected in your system can be controlled by your operating system. That is why we call it as OS is called as resource allocator, resource manager, and the control program. Now, when I say kernel, it is the one program running all the times on your system. As we say in a human being, the heart beats continuously. That's why we are alive. If the heartbeat stops, we are dead. That means in the operating system, the heart of the operating system is kernel, which gets executed or which keeps on running continuously on your program. That is important sentence. Right? Now, someone is asking control. Control means what? Suppose, Shrikant, OS not only controls the execution of program, but it also controls hardware devices connected to the system. Now, for example, Shrikant, machine A is saying, I want to go for printing. तो machine A के keyboard से control P command गया and print job हुआ. Means can I say it is managing your keyboard, it is managing your command as well as it is managing the printer. Similarly, when I say machine B, when I give the machine B say input command as control P, it is like you are giving a signals. Absolutely correct. So जहां से उसको जिस hardware से उसको request आएगा, obviously उस hardware से वो execute करेगा. You are saying I need 8 bytes of memory, means it will be basically allocating 8 bytes to you. How you are saying you are writing a software application, you are writing a program, I need a double variable of D. So it is like I am giving instruction to the operating system controls your inputs and as well as the output. Hope it's clear now. Got it? Good. So these all are basically called as OS, as a resource allocator, resource manager, and the control program. These all are some basic functionalities of operating system. That why they are called as basic functionalities, it is because आप कोई भी operating system लो, हर एक ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम के मेजर 5 टास्क आर द फर्स्ट 5. फाइल एंड आईओ मैनेजमेंट, हार्डवेयर एब्स्ट्रैक्शन, प्रोसेस मैनेजमेंट, मेमोरी मैनेजमेंट एंड सीपीयू scheduling. So file and IO management. In this case, let us assume in my machine I have, let us say, C, D, E, F, G drive, H drive, and so on. In your machine, maybe you have only C and D drive. Maybe someone is having Ubuntu, only one drive. Maybe you are having 5 drives. Means can I say I have different file and input output management. I can have a keyboard with you. I can have, you can say, a monitor. I can use different input output devices. Maybe I can use external Bluetooth related devices, or maybe I can use a normal connecting wala mouse, or you can say a wireless mouse. So there can be different types of IO devices. There can be different types of files. Files, I'm talking about maybe different types also. Maybe you're working with system files, maybe you're working with .c file, आपकी .text file, .doc file. तो ये जो सारे फाइल्स के हैंडलिंग है, that is done by your operating system, right? IO management means, for example, if I'm saying I wish to scan some document, so obviously I will just give a scan command, and that gets connected over the scanner, and then you will get a scanned copy. That is called as IO management. Next is hardware abstraction. When I say I'm giving hello world from my keyboard, right? It gets printed on your output screen. When it gets printed on your output screen, are you really aware about how your keyboard is getting connected to the monitor? Are you aware about it? How it converts your keyboard key press signal, or how whether it is converting into bits and bytes, maybe in binary data? I'm hardly bothered about it, and I even don't know about it. That is called as abstraction. So what is abstraction? Abstraction basically hides me the internals of the hardware. You are not aware about internally how your hardware is getting processed, and that is the basically major, you can say, एडवांटेज. ये सब कौन हैंडल करता है? आपका ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम हैंडल करता है. Next is process management. Now, if I'm saying right now, this is my first application which I'm executing. This is my Zoom application which I'm executing. This is my Chrome browser. Maybe this is Paint, and this is something called as Explorer. So currently in my machine, 5 applications are opened, and I may switch from one application to another application. And whenever any application which I am executing, that becomes the process. जब आप सिर्फ day5_1.c file बनाते हो, that is called as program. But hope you remember the loader, when you type ./a.exe, at that point आपका जो file है वो load होता है into the main memory for the execution. Do you remember this concept? So whenever my program gets loaded into the main memory, that is called as a process. कौन सा प्रोसेस कब एग्जीक्यूट करना है, कौन से प्रोसेस का मुझे चेंजेस चाहिए, या फिर कौन सा प्रोसेस मुझे करंटली एग्जीक्यूट करना है, कंप्लीट डिटेल्स आर मैनेज्ड बाय योर ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम. दैट इज कॉल्ड एज प्रोसेस मैनेजमेंट. फॉर एग्जांपल, currently I am on slide number 8, right? Suppose I go to Paint and I say new Paint, right? In this scenario, when I go back to this, क्या वो मुझे फर्स्ट स्लाइड पे लेके गया कि 8th स्लाइड पे ही रखा उसने? Did it retain the last value for it? Yes. वो फिर से मुझे फर्स्ट पेज पे कभी नहीं लेके जाएगा. That means it is the job of the OS to maintain where I have left the last process. उसको वो वहां पे ही इंटैक्ट रखेगा, और आपने अगर पेंट पे गए तो वो पेंट से इसको लेके आएगा. This is called as process management. There can be multiple number of processes which gets executed in your machine, and those are called as process management. We will see how the process gets executed, what actually gets generated whenever you are working with process, what are the different algorithms of process, that we will see in detail, maybe in tomorrow's class. Next is memory management. When you talk about memory, memory is basically some storage area. अब मैं आपको बोलती हूँ कि today I have taught you something called a storage class, right? So if I say I am using register keyword, so I will get the memory from CPU register. If I'm using a static keyword, I'll get the memory from data section. If I have a memory into the dynamic memory, तो हमें heap section में मिलता है. Next, if I'm saying I want integer data type, so I'll go for 4 bytes of data. If I say I want to go for character data type, so I will go for that particular type of data. So the complete storage of memory is done or handled by your operating system. Again, for memory management, there are different algorithms, there are different techniques that we will see in more detail. So these are the basic functionality. Next is CPU scheduling algorithms. Now, when I say CPU scheduling means basically you want to perform some operations, and you basically wish to go for, let us say, 3 processes to get executed. So in that case, पहला process कौन सा execute होना चाहिए, सेकेंड प्रोसेस कौन सा एग्जीक्यूट होना चाहिए, थर्ड प्रोसेस कौन सा एग्जीक्यूट होना चाहिए, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज शेड्यूलिंग. फॉर दैट वी हैव डिफरेंट एल्गोरिथम्स. देयर आर टू मेजर कैटेगरीज, प्रीएम्प्टिव एंड नॉन प्रीएम्प्टिव. देयर इज फर्स्ट कम फर्स्ट सर्विस, देयर इज राउंड रॉबिन. सो बहुत सारे एल्गोरिथम्स है, वी विल सी दैट इन डिटेल. सो दिस इज बेसिकली कॉल्ड एज सीपीयू शेड्यूलिंग. So these are the major basic functionality any operating system may provide. And when you talk about operating system, ये अगर कोई भी operating system नहीं provide करता है, that means your OS is not proper. Every OS just perform these as a basic, you can say, functionalities. Right now, extra utility functions. When you say extra utility, आप जब Windows में login करते हो तो आप password set करते हो, right? Normally you set the password for logging in. If I do not set the password, will my Windows work fine? Everyone? Yes, of course it will work fine. It is because it's an additional feature. जब तक आप password नहीं लिखोगे, at that moment, will it allow you to log in? Obviously no. So that is nothing but additional functionality that it provides, protection and security. Next, if I'm saying I am using Windows platform, then will it load the Windows GUI for you? Obviously yes. If I'm saying I want Ubuntu platform, will it load Ubuntu platform for you? Ubuntu का ही आपको user interface दिखाएगा? Of course yes. Next, if I say I want a user interfacing which is basically as per my requirement, आप अपने हिसाब से applications use कर सकते हो, आप GUI खुद का बना सकते हो, different GUI are available, themes are available and so on. So is it compulsory? No. If you set it, then it will allocate. So that is called as additional or extra utility. When you talk about networking, if I have a system, if I do not connect over the network, will it be fine? Yes, it will be fine. It's because networking is also an extra utility functionality. Is it okay? Everyone, have you understood what are the major OS functions, what are the basic functions, and what are the extra utility functions, right? Now, hang problem of CPU. Akshay, someone have asked me. Akshay, I'm not getting your question. Why your CPU hangs? Is it the question? Yes, it's because suppose up, for example, can you please tell me what is your hard disk size? Assume I'm considering 500 GB, right? Okay, 1 terabyte. I'm considering 500. Can you please tell me your RAM size of your machine? 2 GB, or let us say I'm considering 4 GB, right? So if you talk about hard disk, क्या मेरा ये पूरा 500 GB वाला डेटा मैं एक साथ रैम में लोड कर सकती हूँ क्या? ऑब्वियसली नो. करें, मेन मेमोरी में कितना डेटा हो सकता है? मैक्सिमम 4 GB का. तो सपोज आई एम executing application 1, let us say A1, I'm executing A2, I'm executing A3. ये 3 applications है, मैं RAM में लेके आऊंगी and I will execute it. But suppose at a time you are saying I wish to go for 20 applications to be executed or to be there into the RAM. Okay, what your RAM will do? Okay, I have a capacity, I can start 20 applications for you, no problem. But suppose I'm saying right now I'm opening A21, A50. अब मैंने 50 applications एक साथ open कर दिया, right? In that case, if I am opening that applications, it means whenever I try to move from A1 to A3, maybe A2 to A5, all tap करती हूँ. तो इसका मतलब क्या? आपके CPU में ये application से ये application में जाती हूँ. That means this process is called as context switching. We will see that in case of your processes. When I say context switching, it means all tap किया ये मिला, next all tap किया ये मिला, next all tap किया ये आया. It is my processor is so fast that it can easily switch. But sometimes my machine also gets hanged. It is because your RAM is full and your processor is taking so much time from switching of one application to another application, and that's the reason your processor becomes slow. इसलिए आपका machine hang होता है. आया समझ में? So अगर मैं बोलती हूँ मेरा 4 GB का भी RAM नहीं है, मेरे पास ओनली 2 GB रैम है, तो 2 GB रैम में आप उसको बोलोगे कि अब मुझे इतने एप्लीकेशंस एग्जीक्यूट करना है, तो लोड ऑन योर मेन मेमोरी गेट्स मोर, यू कैन से लोडेड. एंड आई होप यू रिमेंबर, जब तक डेटा रैम में नहीं आता तब तक मेरा सीपीयू वर्क नहीं करेगा, बिकॉज सीपीयू फेचेस द डेटा फ्रॉम द मेन मेमोरी. आई होप यू रिमेंबर मेमोरी हायरार्की. इज योर आंसर इज क्लियर, अक्षय? नाउ Why your CPU or your machine hangs? It is because sometimes when your processor is too busy in doing the background as well as foreground processes, there are different processes too, right? So जैसे आपका clock application है, वो background में update हो रहा है. आपका कुछ applications रहती है वो front, you can say आप अभी I have opened this Acrobat reader and I'm showing you the PPT slide. So this is my foreground process which is getting executed in front of me, and this is not, you can say this is currently I'm executing. Okay, so that I hope you have got your answer, right, Akshay? So let us go ahead. We are saying what is program. I hope everyone have seen what is program. A program is set of instruction to do some specific task, right? When I say to do some specific task, that is called as program. We have seen n number of programs into lectures. There can be different types of programs. One is user programs. User programs are written by the users by using various programming languages. Next, demo.c, demo.java, demo.py. जैसे हमारे पास जो भी आप .c files लिखते हो and जो भी आप programs लिखते हो, they belong to user programs only. Why? Because they are developed by you. When you talk about application programs, it can be any application. It can be your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Notepad, VS Code, your any database management. That programs which helps you to do some specific task. That is application program. So the number of applications that you install on your machine becomes your application programs. By using those applications, whatever programs you write, that becomes your user programs. Next, I do compile my program. I have something called as linking. Linkers, loaders, drivers, which works at the system level. Those are called as system level programs. All the programs related to computer operation and coordination, those are called as system programs. Your operating system may be Windows, Mac, Unix, Linux, MS-DOS, all these are system programs. Along with that, when you talk about compilers, when you talk about linkers, loaders, drivers, जब आप कोई भी hardware device लेते हो, you need to install some hardware, you need to install some drivers for that, and then that is called as basically system programs, right? Now, right? So this is basically called as system programs. So when you talk about program, it has three categories: user, application, system. Next, as I say, a program is basically set of instruction. So जब मैं बोलती हूँ I wish to write a program, I wish to write a program. In that case, you create, let us say today it's day 5_1.c file. This is called as passive entity. Why? It is available in your disk, but you are not yet executing it. You are just trying to write the code into it. जब तक आपका program is available in your disk area, that is your passive entity. But as soon as you wish to execute this application, what do you write? /a.exe. What happens actually? This gets loaded into your main memory. And this gets loaded into the main memory for the execution. And that's why it is called as active entity. So if I'm saying currently I'm working with Paint, so that's my active entity. Currently I have background में my day 01 PPT, that becomes a passive. Once I switch from this application to this application, then it again becomes active entity, that becomes the passive entity. Have you understood what is passive and active entity? The one which is currently in execution mode is called as active entity. All right. Now, everyone is aware about program examples, maybe application programs, system programs, hardware, and so on. So application programs are all the applications that you use. System programs are editors, compilers, and interpreters. Different hardwares, maybe operating system, your machine language, different microprocessors are available. There are different physical devices which are available in your system that comes under the category called as hardware. Now, to write the program, now, Aisha, when you are saying something is getting downloaded, it can be an active entity. But the thing is, currently, which application you are executing, that becomes the active entity, right? That becomes your active entity. Your processor speed is so fast. In that case, your processor can execute multiple tasks simultaneously, right? In that case, when you download, it can be an active entity, but that can be considered as a background process. Okay, Aisha? All right. because we will see one algorithm there is which is called as multi-level queue algorithm, in which your operating system keeps a track which are the processes which runs in the foreground, which are the processes which runs in the background. So it maintains a queue for that. Which are not so important, keeps it into the background. Which are very important, which are currently getting executed, it puts into the foreground. So that job is done by your operating system. Okay, there is a queue which is maintained by your OS. Now, to write the program, we can use ID. Which ID you are using for your C programs? Can you please answer me, everyone? Which ID you are using? You are using VS Code, correct? Right? You are using VS Code. And I hope I have given you the answer why you are using VS Code, because it gives you the facility to write, to compile, to debug, to execute, and to, you can see the output of the program at one stage. That's why we are going for ID. These are different programs examples. And also, we have seen this kind of program compilation flow. That is in lecture number 2 of C program. That is program.c, then you have program.i, program.s, program.o, and finally you will get executable file. So out of which, where you generate a .c file, that becomes your application program. Your compiler, assembler, linker, that becomes your system level programming, right? And when you develop your own programs in .c extension, those becomes your C programs, becomes your user programs, right? Why I've taken specifically C program? Because C already it's going on, and also you will understand कि हम GCC जब लिखते हैं, जब a.exe लिखते हैं, तो actually कैसे process होता है internally. That reason I have taken the C program execution phases. So any program which you are writing currently is a, you can say as a passive. When you are in the event that program is in execution mode, that is an active entity. Now, about this, now we will talk about something called as Unix, or you can say OS concepts. Once the question was asked as a full form of Unix. When you talk about Unix, it was originally spelled at Unix. It stands for Uniplexed Information and Computing System. It's a popular operating system which was developed at Bell Labs in 1970s. Unix was developed at AT&T Bell Labs in 1970s by Ken Thompson. It was the first machine, TEC-PDP-7. This is called as processor. Which processor? Digital Equipment Corporation Programmable Data Processing Unit. So जैसे आप Intel processor बोलते हो, so similar Core i5 processor बोलते हो, i7 बोलते हो. Similarly, this was the processor on which it was executed first. Unix was the first multi-user, multi-programming, multitasking operating system. Now, have you ever seen that when you log in, you can see in some of the maybe in your colleges or offices, there can be 2 users for one OS. एक normal admin रहता है और एक guest user रहता है. Have you ever seen these? Right? So this is called as multi-user. For one particular OS, there can be multiple users also. That is multi-user. When I say multi-programming, means multiple number of programs you can write on one single OS. ऐसा हो सकता है क्या कि you cannot write any Java or Python application on the same OS? No, it's not possible. You can do any programming and you can do multitasking also. What is multitasking? In the background, you listen to the music. In the foreground, you write the programs. That is called as multitasking. In the background, you are working on some data, and in the foreground, you are writing some applications to work on that data. That is called as multitasking. So operating system helps us to go for multi-user, multi-programming, and multitasking OS, right? Unix was specially designed for the developers by the developers. Because Unix is why I'm taking Unix, it is because it is open source, right? What is open source? We will see this. System architecture designed for Unix is followed by all the operating system. That's why we are using Unix. तो ये जो मैंने यहाँ पे आपको कर्नल का डायग्राम बनाया, just a second. Right. So I have shown you something called as this diagram. This is called as layered architecture. Now, all right. So this was a diagram which I have shown you with respect to OS architecture. And this architecture is called as layered architecture, right? What is this layered architecture is talking about? The layered architecture is of Unix architecture. This is, you can say, as a you can say a standard, or you can say this is a reference for other operating systems, where I have a kernel, I have hardware, I have user defined applications, and I have OS. So that's the reason we have written here what is OS. What is Unix architecture? Unix system architecture design is followed by all the other operating systems like Windows, Linux, Mac, Android, etc. So you can say Unix is referred as mother of all the modern operating system, because the layered architecture is followed by all OSs. That's while developing the operating system. And that's why once Unix full form was asked, and this is what is basically Unix operating system concepts, right? Any questions so far? Any questions so far? No. Are you guys there? Understanding the things? Yes. Okay. So let us go ahead. I will consider two different scenarios. For example, let me take, today I am going to share with you day5_1.c. Yes, Rishi, it's too much theory, but can't help it. The reason is OS ऐसा ही सब्जेक्ट है जिसमें कल से आपको थोड़ा और इंटरेस्टिंग होगा कि जब मैं आपको एल्गोरिथम्स बताऊंगी, थोड़े प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो जाएंगे तो आपको थोड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग लगेगा. Day 1 is always theory ka is little bit more theory. I can understand. Yes. So when let us assume I'm saying day5_1.c is a program which I have written on my machine. I have shared it through your Git. This I have developed on Windows platform. Maybe you are on Ubuntu platform. Directly आपने day5_1.c program लिया and can you directly execute it? Can you directly execute it? Can you directly execute it? Of course, no. You need to first compile and then you need to execute. Are you getting? Are you getting the thing? Now, when I say I have a machine 1, I have written some program. When I transmit it to another machine, maybe any platform, I just have to first compile and then run. Yes, I can do it. This technique or this concept is called as portability. What is portability? Program written in any language on one platform can be compiled and executed on any other machine. Understood, everyone? Right? जब तक आप मेरा दिया हुआ प्रोग्राम को कंपाइल नहीं करोगे, तो till that time you will not be able to see the output of that file, even though you have ./a.exe. The reason behind that is every operating system, maybe consider Windows, maybe consider Ubuntu, every operating system maintains something called as file format. Every operating system has its own file format. That's the reason we cannot, even though I'm saying this is portable. Portable means movement of one application from one system to another is possible, provided you follow certain steps out of it. The reason is every OS is having different file formats. So, for example, consider second scenario. I have this machine, I have Linux platform. Again, I've written a program, but I will not be directly executable code, even though I have. If I say direct run, I will not be able to execute. So these are the two possible scenarios. The reason is every OS maintains a file format. For what? For the executable file. मतलब ./ जब आप .c प्रोग्राम विंडोज पे कंपाइल करते हो तो आपको .a.exe मिलता है. जब आप .c फाइल उबंटू पे प्लेटफॉर्म पे एग्जीक्यूट करते हो, हैव यू एवर हर्ड a.out फाइल मिलता है? याद है क्या सबको? जब आप C फाइल में कंपाइल करते हो, एक बनती है .obj फाइल इफ यू आर ऑन विंडोज प्लेटफॉर्म, and .o बनती है if you are on Ubuntu platform. Do you know this? Have I taught this in second lecture? .asm generates in Windows. .s gets generated into Ubuntu. याद है क्या? Right? So this is basically, Shaya, your video is on, you can switch it off. Right? So a.out में यहाँ पे अगर executable file a.exe बनती है तो we type ./a.exe. Here we type ./a.out. Every operating system keeps its own file formats that is based on the design of OS. You cannot change that, right? So that is basically file format. Now, file format of an executable file in a Linux is ELF. ELF stands for executable and linkable format. Whereas in Windows, it is PE, which is called as portable executable. तो हर एक सिस्टम में फाइल मेंटेन करने के लिए फॉर्मेट जो स्पेसिफाइड है, दैट फॉर्मेट इज गिवन अ नेम. विंडोज यूजेस PE and Linux uses ELF. These are just the file format naming conventions. The file format specifies how you store the data and instruction inside the executable file in an organized manner. ELF file format divides an executable file logically into different sections, and each section with a specific data and what programs can be kept. So file format specifies कैसे मुझे data store करना है, कैसे मुझे instruction execute करने हैं, and so on and so forth. That is the reason even if we say my C language is portable बनती है, it means what? .c file move कर सकते हैं, but execute तब तक नहीं होती है जब तक आप उसको compile नहीं करते हो. Did you all get the scenario of portability? Everyone? Yes. Let us go ahead. We are seeing next operating system view. Just give me. So let us observe operating system view. If I'm saying I have system calls, I have, user applications. Let me take a simple example first with respect to C programming only. Suppose I'm saying I have included stdio.h header file. I'm using a printf function in my program. Now, what does this printf will do? It will go, or it will give a call. To whom? A system call. It says, I wish to print the data. So it will give a system call. What system call it will give? It is called as write. Write system call. It's like a function only. Suppose I'm saying scanf. I'm saying %d, address of A. It will go to your operating system and says, I want to fetch some data. So it will give again a system call. And that system call name is called as read. Suppose I wish to go for printing. It will give an instruction to your operating system. Please give a call to a system call called as write. It will write onto your page, maybe onto your some paper or wherever you want to print, right? Next, if I say I want to perform scanning operation, it means it will give a call to OS and says, please execute read system call. Matlab internally, what happens is, you know only this function, print, printf, maybe print, maybe scan, maybe scanf, and so on. But internally, your operating system gives a call to the functions, which is nothing but write system call, read system call, write system call, read system call. So there can be number of system calls which your operating system do or operating system executes rather. So if I'm saying I am working with different application programs, user and system level programs, there are three major categories. One is a GUI application, another is a batch processing, another is command line. There are three types of user interfaces. What is user interface? Via which you are able to give instruction to your operating system. Now, if I'm saying I am using terminal, okay, terminal में मैं command देती हूँ gcc program name .c. terminal में मैं command देती हूँ /a.exe. This type of GUI is called as command line interface. Means through the command or through the command user interface, you are giving some commands to your operating system such that it can execute the instruction. Okay, next. Let us say I'm using a calculator application in my machine. I will press button 1. I will press again, let us say button 4, and I will press, or rather I will say press 1, and I'll press button plus sign. I'll press button 4. I'll press maybe button equal. So obviously this will give me a result as 5. Means I am trying to use some graphical user interface for performing the operation. And that is nothing but called as, you can say, GUI application. Have you understood what is CUI and GUI? CUI stands for command user interface, GUI where it gives you the graphical user interface. Now, suppose you are working in one, you can say, you are having, let us say, some lab. And suppose there are different number of machines which are available. And they all are performing or working on one bigger applications. So this is like, this is giving some instruction, this is giving some instruction, this is giving one instruction, this is giving instruction. A batch of applications or a batch of machines are working together on one single application is called as batch processing. So it can be anything, maybe through the command, maybe through the anything. जैसे आपके पास client and server बोलते हैं, तो server से आपको बहुत सारे client connected भी रहते हैं, so they can work together. That is called as a batch. So you are that is basically a batch processing. So when you say batch, it is basically the job which can be done by one collectively by one or more machines or maybe by the processes. So when I say multiple processes can also get executed for performing some one single task, that is called as batch. So all these are basically called as user interfaces. Why do we have these user interfaces? The reason behind that is I want to go for some services to be used. What are the services? All the functions that are provided by the operating system. It may be a program execution, it may be the IO operation, it may be the file system, it may be communication, resource allocation, accounting, protection security, error detection. हम GUI के through ये सारे proper operations perform कर सकते हैं, provided I have a proper operating system and I have a proper hardware for it. Have you understood up to this point? Now, when I say I am using applications, I am using different services, then who is the intermediate between your user level application execution to get these services? Answer as system calls. So what are the system calls? System calls. So what are the system calls? System calls are also called as call gates. The reason is they helps us to gain these all services, right? So let us go ahead to in detail about what are the system calls. Programming interface to the service provided by OS is nothing but system call. If you observe the diagram, this is called as system call, right? This is the interface or intermediate level between your user interfaces and the OS. Mostly accessed by programs through application program interface rather than direct system calls. Let me explain. In your program, in your C program, you write, can you write and then you write hello? ऐसा हम लिख सकते हैं क्या? नहीं. क्यों नहीं लिख सकते हैं? The reason is write नाम का function is not understood by your compiler, by your C compiler. Also, this write नाम का this write is internally a system call of your OS, right? Now, when I give a call to printf, it internally calls the system call called as write. Can you please tell me? अब मैंने जो OS का system call use किया write, is it in a direct way or in indirect way? Is it in a direct way or in indirect way? Obviously, it is an indirect way. So I will say, listen carefully the sentence. I'll say, in case of my C programming, printf function gives a call to the write system call. So can I say printf is one function which I have written in my VS Code from the VS Code application? Yes. So can I say at this point, your VS Code printf function is acting as an application program interface for giving a call to the write function? Am I using a third-party application VS Code? Yes. So I can say VS Code. May printf function is talking about APIs. Have you understood what is API? API stands for Application Program Interface. Here, what is the use of it? Rather than direct system call, use the system call interface, which invokes intended system call in the OS kernel and returns the status of the system call. Printf will give a call, intended system call means जिसकी मुझे need है, that is nothing but write system call. Have you understood? तो हम जब भी operations execute करते हैं in my operating system through the various applications, those generally gives a call to some specific system call such that your performance or your operations gets executed smoothly. Have you understood? Everyone, right? Now, when you talk about, someone is asking, please repeat command line. Now, if you observe, in my system, this is my command prompt. अगर मैं यहाँ पे dir लिखूंगी तो वो मुझे पूरा directory structure listing करके देगा. Do you all agree? Right? So have I executed one command through command line argument? मैंने through command उसको कुछ तो instruction दिया. That is called as command line argument. Okay? And when you talk about batch, it is basically you are giving some input from multiple processes for one, on some single application. एक complete batch execute होता है. Right? So you can say that is a batch processing. So when you have different servers, so in that case, you can go for batch processing also. ठीक है? Okay, Akshay have got it. So have you understood what is API? Application Program Interface? Rather than direct system call, use the system call interface, which invokes intended system call in the operating system, which will return the status of system call. So printf is the best example, which is giving a call to the right and it will execute. Have you understood up to this point? Everyone, right? So in your OS, in your Unix, there are 64 system calls. In Linux, more than 300. In Windows, more than 3,000 system calls are there. You do not have to remember the number. This is just for your information. कि Unix में इतने system calls है. System call is nothing but like a function only, nothing else. But they are predefined when they design the operating system. At that moment, that gets you can say designed. When system call gets called, the CPU switches from user-defined mode to the system-defined code. Hence, system calls are also called as software interrupts or trap. For example, can you please tell me, यहाँ पे मैंने printf दिया, वो कौन सी application से दिया? VS Code से, right? Is the user is aware about it? Am I aware about the VS Code application? Yes. Now, when I have used this printf, this particular part, write a system call, is executed by my OS. Is my user is aware about it? No, right? So, जब भी मैं printf लिखती हूँ, there is an interrupt which gets generated. What is that interrupt? It is nothing but also called as a trap, also called as a system call. जैसे ही printf लिखा, OS को ये समझ में आएगा कि yes, I need to give a call to write and I have to display this. That's why your system calls are also called as interrupt or trap. In this case, the CPU switched from user code to system defined mode. ये हुआ मेरा user का mode, ये हुआ मेरा system mode, because operating system is at system level. Have you understood this line, the meaning of this line? What do you mean by trap? What do you mean by system call or the interrupt? All right. So, for example, if I'm saying I have a source file, I have the destination file, the system call sequence is, maybe I acquire input file name, maybe it will ask me something on the screen, maybe I'll accept the input, maybe I'll acquire output the file name, I'll write the from screen, accept the input, open the input file. If the file is existing, okay, otherwise create the output file, and so on and so forth. Means एक single source file to destination file complete करना है process, तो मुझे वहां से एक data copy करके destination में paste करना है. So that is done with certain set of steps, and those are called as by performing different system calls, right? As far as your system calls is concerned, this is how your relationship is there. between your API, between your system call, and between your OS. I have a user application. Suppose I'm saying I want to open some file. Then it goes to your system call interface. It will try to open your file. After that, this will go to your hard disk. Maybe it will open that file and it will try to return and it will open the file for you. So when I am giving instruction from the user level, that is user mode. And when your operating system works in the backend, that is nothing but kernel mode. How it does, it's the job of OS. Management is based on OS. So via user mode, when we give some commands, there is an interface called as system call interface, which takes your OS to the kernel mode and opens that file. So there are two major modes of OS. One is user mode, another is kernel mode. You will see in detail maybe in the next slide. So if I say, let us take a C example. If I have a printf, this printf I've given from the user side, that is called as user mode. It goes to the standard C library. Standard C library में देखेगा कि printf का मतलब है मुझे output में लिखना है. So it will give a write system call. It will perform the operation, come back to it and print your data. So that is kernel mode. So there are two modes of system. One is user mode, another is kernel mode. Right? Now, there are two categories of system call. The first is process control. The second is file management. The third is device management. The fourth is communication. Next is protection and security. Last one is information maintenance. There are different categories. It is specific to your applications. When you talk about, I wish to execute a certain process, I wish to create a new file, I wish to load some process, I want to get which process I am executing, I want to know the process ID. In those scenarios, I want to create a new application, means I want to open a new application. At that moment, I will go for process control system call category. Second category, if I say I'm creating a file, moving a file, copying a file, deleting a file, closing the file, reading the data from the file, writing the data to the file, all these types of operations, whenever I'm working with the files, then which category of system calls I'm talking about, those calls are called as file management category. Next, I may connect different number of devices to your system. Maybe you connect pen drive, maybe you connect hard disk drive, you can connect printer, you can connect scanner, you may disconnect to printer, you may disconnect scanner or pen drive and so on. You may connect headphones, you disconnect headphones. All these are some devices which you connect and release from your system, that is called as device management. So ये सब operations कौन से system call की category में आते हैं, device management में आते हैं. Next, you try to communicate with the processes. You try to communicate over the network. So if I say that, then there may be a requirement where one process wish to communicate with another process. We will see something called as inter-process communication, and we will see something called as how inter-process communication takes place. It is with the help of something called as shared memory and shared region. So that these are the two categories. So when the processes wish to communicate with each other, then we can go for something called as communication. So system call की category क्या है? Communication है. Next, if you wish to allocate some password, if you wish to allocate some security, then you will go with a category called as system call category called as protection and security. If you wish to give some permission, किसी फाइल को हाइड करना है, किसी फाइल को विजिबल करना है, कोई फाइल राइट क्लिक करके आपको उसको पासवर्ड सेट करना है, everything can be done with the help of protection and security. Next, information maintenance. For example, you wish to display this clock, you wish to display the date, you wish to display time, you need to update your system date, system time, you need to get some information with respect to system, who are the users, who is the admin name, and so on. Every information with respect to that category of system call is called as information maintenance category. Have you understood the major 6 categories of system calls? Right. Now, in this slide, I have included here the major categories of system calls. I have also included in short, when I'm talking about process control, I'm talking about loading, executing, ending, and aborting the process, creating a process, terminating a process, getting and setting the process, allocating and freeing the memory. When you talk about file management, it is basically creating the file, deleting the file, opening the file, closing the file, read and write. When you talk about device management, you are requesting a device, you are releasing the device, reading the data, writing the data, getting the device information, setting the device attributes and so on. So ये सारे functions है जो मेरे system calls provide कर सकते हैं. Communication में you can send and receive message, you can transmit the status information, you can check whether the network is connected or not. All these comes under the communication category. Granting some permission, changing the ownership, changing the read write permission, giving some authorization, hiding some files, everything comes under this protection and security. Getting time or system date or system data comes under this category. So in short explanation about these system calls I've included over here. Now there are many system calls. As I said, आपके Linux में, Windows में 3000 system calls है, Linux में 300 system calls है. So if I'm saying that number, it means इतने सारे functions predefined है उस operating system के लिए. So if I'm talking about process control, so I have a fork command, I have exit command, and I have wait. So ये क्या है? Yes, just a few examples I have included. For example, if I'm saying fork, fork is basically used to create a child process. Suppose I'm working on one process and I've created a process within that process that is called as fork. So fork is basically a system call when one process is generating another process, right? Next, exit. When you close this application, obviously this will give a call to exit. When you say wait, sometimes you might have received some pop-up box or error in your system. This application cannot be opened or it takes little time for basically opening. Do you want to exit or do you want to wait? So जब आप उसको बोलते हो please wait for some time, so that means internally wait नाम का system call होता है. So these are the actual few names of system call that I have included in each slide. Next, when you talk about file, I can have read and write. When you talk about device, I can have read and write. When you talk about communication, I have pipe and SHM get. Pipe stands for one system call. SHM get is shared memory get. These two are called as different system calls, which specifically works with inter-process communication. तो जब मैं आपको कल inter-process communication topic पढ़ाऊंगी, तब ये फिर से system calls detail में explain करूंगी. Next, there is change mode, which is CH mode. If you want to change ownership, you write CH own. So change CH mode and CH own are used for protection and security. If you say, I need to get some ID, get PID, and sleep, these all are some examples of system calls. Did you all get the meaning of system call categories, everyone? So, if I ask you, I'll just save this for your reference. C4. Right. Once the question is asked, if we wish to basically write, or let us say to do print job, OS gives a call to which system call? Options A था print, option B था write, option C था printing, and option none of the above, right? In these case, these types of questions are asked. Normally students क्या करते हैं, print option आया तो वो print नाम का system call को select कर देते हैं. It is not like that. Print आया तो वो write system call को call करता है. Are you understanding? So here, this is the correct answer called as write. So in hurry, make sure do not click on print because print नाम का system call नहीं है, write नाम का system call. समझ में आया question? Have you understood the question? Type of question, MCQs? Right. Next, if user internal process or the actual function name. जैसे मैं बोलती हूँ कि मुझे डेटा प्रिंट करना है तो 100% मुझे प्रिंट एफ ही यूज करना पड़ेगा इन सी प्रोग्राम पवन, पर मैं वहां पे राइट प्रिंटलन या प्रिंट ऐसा नहीं लिख सकती, मुझे स्पेसिफिक फंक्शन नेम यूज करना पड़ेगा. वैसे ओएस भी इंटरनली उस स्पेसिफिक सिस्टम कॉल को कॉल करता है. नाउ इफ वी विश टू चेंज द मोड, राइट, ऑफ if we wish to change the mode of some file, change mode means read mode, write mode, कौन सा मोड उसका चेंज करना है, read write execute रहते हैं. So which system call you will go for? There is ch mode, there is you can say ch ownership, there is c change, and there, let us say, there is change mode. तो these types of options are asked. तो ch mode नाम का एक खुद से ही सिस्टम कॉल है, तो मोड चेंज करना है तो मैं ch mode नाम के सिस्टम कॉल को मेरा ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम कॉल करता है. दिस टाइप ऑफ क्वेश्चन वाज आस्क्ड इन वंस इन CCAT. समझ में आया? Have you understood up to this point what is system call and what are the categories of system call and how I have included this in slide? This is the major category. These are the functions and these are the few examples. If you wish to explore more, then you can just type process control system calls in case of Windows. तो आपको पूरी लिस्ट दिखेगी, कौन सा सिस्टम कॉल क्या काम करता है वो भी आपको डिटेल में आएगा. Is it okay? But this is sufficient as far as the CCAT is concerned. Okay, let us go ahead. Now we are seeing something called as dual mode operation. It allows the OS to SHM get. Akshay, SHM get is called as shared memory region. Now, this concept I will teach you tomorrow in the topic called as inter-process communication. But for time being, I'll just give you a example. Suppose I have here a process 1 and I have process 2. Now, in this case, this is my process P1, this is my process P2. And if a process P1 wish to communicate with P2, and if process P2 wish to communicate with P1, right? If these two processes wish to communicate, then due to the security reason, operating system never allows them to communicate directly. What I'll say, P1 को जो भी data share करना है, please put it into this area. P2 will take it on from there. P2 को जो भी data share करना है, that data P2 will take from here only. So this is called as shared memory. If both the processes wish to share some data, instead of sending them directly, P1 will put it into this region and P2 will take it from here. And P2 will take it, will give it over here, and P2 will take it from here. So this region, whenever it gets allocated, internally your OS gives a call SHM get system call. समझ में आया? Have you understood, everyone? So this IPC concept कल मैं आपको बताऊंगी. At least आपको थोड़ा सा idea आ गया, right? Someone have asked me fork. एक बार क्वेश्चन पूछा था, I have 2 raised to n is the formula for generating or whenever there is a fork system call. It is like when you talk about fork, it is basically used for creating a process. Now, suppose I have written a program. Okay, so this is my first program, right? And program 1. And from this program, let us say I'm giving a print command. And this file is getting printed over here. Obviously, it's a print command. तो फिर से ये process बन जाएगा और ये मेरे printer को पास जाएगा and it will perform the task, right? Means can I say this is my parent process, this is my child process? One process is giving, you can say one process is generating another process. This, if this is kind of a scenario, then internally कौन सा system call होता है? Fork system call होता है. आप समझ में आया? Creating a child process from your parent process is called as fork. Is it fine? Everyone, hope you are understanding. All right. So, any questions so far? No. Good. Now, let us go ahead. As I've said, जब भी मैं user level पे कोई applications, if I try to execute, in that case, I am in user mode. But when I try to, or when my operating system tries to execute some system calls, at that moment, your operating system works in the kernel mode. So why we have dual mode operation? Because we want our operating system to protect itself from the other system components. One is user mode, another is kernel mode. Now, how your operating system will understand whether I'm in kernel mode or whether I'm in user mode? The operating system provides one bit, which is called as mode bit. So what is mode bit? Mode bit is provided by the hardware. If I am working at system level, if my operating system is executing the system calls, then mode bit is set to 0, and that is called as kernel mode. If my operating system is helping me for executing user processes, in that case I am in user side, that is user mode. Mode bit is equal to 1 if I am in user mode, mode bit is equal to 0 if I'm in kernel mode. समझ में आया everyone? So user mode and the kernel mode are the two modes. How your operating system distinguish between these two mode bits? One, if I'm having 0, that means I'm in kernel mode. If I'm in 1, that means it is a user mode. The questions are asked based on modes of OS, mode bit. If I am in kernel mode, what is the value of mode bit? Answer should be 0. If I am in user mode, answer should be 1. Right? So it provides the ability to distinguish when the system is running in user mode or kernel mode. It's not code, it is mode, just a typing mistake. Some instruction designated as privileged, only executable in the kernel mode. Okay, so to perform the privileged operation, we must transit into OS through well-defined interfaces, which is called as system calls and the interrupt handlers. Means user process में मैं printf लिखती हूँ, scanf लिखती हूँ. When I execute the program, there is an intermediate level of system calls from which your OS automatically changes its mode bit from 1 to 0, gives a call to write a system call. It will perform its operation, come back to your user mode. This is how your system works, and that is basically made available or made possible because of this mode bit. Right? Because everyone cannot work on the system level. अगर मैं system level पे काम करूंगी तो operating system may get damaged too. It may have some specific things to be done in the backend also. So that is the reason to provide a security. Your OS is basically trying to change your mode from 1 to 0. So can I say whatever number of user level programs I am executing, they all will belong to which mode? Which mode? Obviously, user mode. समझ में आया? Everyone. तो mode bit उसका 1 रहेगा. So there are few namings given to the mode bit: system mode, kernel mode, privilege mode, master mode और supervisor mode. जो भी आप बोलो, all these are same terminologies. User mode is also called as unprivileged mode. They can execute any instruction. They can access any memory locations. They can enable and disable the interrupts. They can change the status of the processors. They can access the memory management unit. They can modify the register for the various tables. But in case of user mode, memory is limited. We cannot access all the memory data, can execute some instruction, cannot disable the interrupts, and they cannot change the processing states. They cannot access the memory management unit. So user level पर हमें as a user बहुत कम rights दिए गए. When your operating system works at kernel mode, everything is possible. जब आप for example, when you talk about user mode, आज मैंने आपको C प्रोग्रामिंग में एक वेरिएबल का एड्रेस प्रिंट करके दिखाया. याद है क्या? एड्रेस ऑफ बैलेंस हमने प्रिंट किया आज. Right. Was I having a right to I was having a right to get the address, but मुझे क्या ये right था कि मैं खुद से बोलूं नहीं I need this memory allocation? No. Right? Your OS allocates your memory. So that is called as some privileges are given to the user and maximum are given. All the privileges are given to your kernel mode. Okay. Have you understood? So transition from user mode to the system mode must be done through well-defined call gates, which is called as system calls. So what are system calls? They help us to transit from kernel mode to user mode. Now, do you remember I have explained today something called as storage class, right? Storage class में, can you please tell me local variable को कहाँ पे जगह मिलता है? Auto variables को कहाँ पे जगह मिलता है? Auto variables receives the data from memory from the stack, right? Do you know where do static receives the memory from? स्टैटिक का आज ही बताया, डेटा सेक्शन, करेक्ट, ग्लोबल रहता है तो डेटा सेक्शन, रजिस्टर रहता है तो सीपीयू रजिस्टर, राइट। नेक्स्ट टाइम व्हेन आई एक्सप्लेन यू द कंसेप्ट ऑफ मेलॉक तो मैं आपको हीप सेक्शन भी बताऊंगी। नाउ प्लीज अंडरस्टैंड, when I say I have my program, maybe program.exe, it is available on the hard disk drive. Every program, whenever it is created, it has different sections. One is the header section, in which the file name, the size of the file, date of creation, date of, you can say, time of creation, number of bytes, starting of the file, ending of the file, the complete information about that file is maintained into header. Can you see it is ELF header? ELF means अभी हमने आज देखा कि when you talk about Windows, it maintains that ELF header file, or Linux, right? Linux maintains ELF header, and your Windows maintain a file format into PE format. That is primary header, right? Second section is BSS section. BSS stands for block start by symbol. Now, suppose I'm writing static integer A, and suppose I am allocating later on A is equal to 50. Assume. Now, can you say here, this is just a declaration? Can I say this is just a declaration? Right. Can I say this is definition? Right. तो जब मेरा static variable सिर्फ declare किया जाता है, at that time it receives the memory from BSS section. जैसे ही मैंने स्टैटिक वेरिएबल को डेटा असाइन कर दिया, इट मूव्स फ्रॉम बीएसएस सेक्शन टू व्हिच सेक्शन? डेटा सेक्शन. दिस इज हाउ इट इज. BSS stands for block start by symbol section. So all the uninitialized static members initially receives the memory into BSS section. Once they are initialized with the value, they receive the memory into the data section part. जब हम कांस्टेंट्स देखेंगे, that gets stored into read only data section, RO data section जिसको बोलते हैं. जब जो भी आप कोड लिखते हो, लाइन ऑफ टेक्स्ट लिखते हो, कमेंट्स लिखते हो, all these are put into code section. Now in your system, whatever number of variables you are declaring, all those are maintained into one table that is called as symbol table, which is also called as literal table. So when this gets generated whenever you are creating a program.exe file. जब आपने प्रोग्राम बनाया है, GCC किया, then you will get a.exe file. That exe file will have this complete information. Now, when I say I wish to execute that file ./a.exe, at that point, it will fetch the information from your header. Header consists of all the information about your file, the location of the file, name of the file, type of the file, whether date of creation, time of creation, every information it will fetch it, and it will load your data from the disk to your main memory. Main memory is also called as RAM memory, right? Now this is loaded into the main memory, जहां पे मेरे पास BSS section रहेगा, data section रहेगा, RO data section रहेगा, code section रहेगा. Because variable का symbol table already memory has been allocated. Header information से already your header के information से ही उसने data को load किया. These sections remains as it is when you are moving from hard disk drive to the main memory. What are the two additional sections that it provides at runtime is the stack section and the heap section. I hope you remember, जब हम function execute करते हैं तो function activation record generate होता है that gets memory into the stack area, and that is nothing but stack section. Have you understood? Everyone, right? Now, when you receive the data into the main memory inside the RAM, जो ये पूरा प्रोसेस है ये यूजर का है तो यूजर स्पेस में कवर होता है. आपके ओएस में देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एज कर्नल स्पेस. कर्नल स्पेस के अंदर only the process control block gets loaded. So what is process control block? I will explain tomorrow, not today. So when you talk about any program which is in the execution mode is brought from your disk to your main memory of your system. What is main memory? That is RAM. The sections are these, and stack and heap are added at the runtime. Have you understood? When the program is loaded into the main memory, that is called as a process, and any process which is available in the RAM, that means it is in the execution mode. That is how your program gets loaded in the main memory, right? So there are two spaces, kernel space and the user space. As a kernel, core part of operating system runs continuously in the main memory. मतलब मेन मेमोरी में, ये मेरा मेन मेमोरी है, उसको दो पार्ट्स में डिवाइड किया है. वन इज कर्नल स्पेस, अनदर इज यूजर स्पेस. As we say, kernel is the continuous execution of program running in your system, right? So उस space को हम kernel space बोलते हैं. Whichever left out is the part of your main memory, it is basically a user space. So user programs gets loaded into the user space only, right? When you're executing a program, process first generates one structure which is called as process control block, which is also called as process descriptor. Tomorrow I will explain you in detail about what is process and what is PCB. So PCB gets created, they remains inside the main memory throughout the execution of the program. Means जैसे ही मैं बोल रही थी कि stack memory में मुझे FAR मिलता है, once the function call is over, it comes back to the calling area. Once you close that application, तो ये यहाँ से भी हट जाता है, आपके disk से नहीं जाता. That's the reason your hard disk is called as permanent storage. Have you understood up to this point? PCB is basically one block जहां पे प्रोसेस का आईडी रहता है, पेरेंट आईडी रहता है, प्रोग्राम काउंटर रहता है, सीपीयू का कौन सा एल्गोरिथम यूज कर रहे हैं वो रहता है, which kind of memory management information you are using, what resources you are using, which is the next process in the execution. All these informations for one single process are maintained in one block that is called as process control block, which is called as process descriptor 2. Have you understood basically the meaning of OS, what is system calls, and what is a major role of OS in your system? So we are done with the first part of your introduction and something called as up to this point. Tomorrow we will start with the process management. With this, I will stop the recording for the day. If you have any queries, please do ask. Thank you.